I'm going to introduce, as you all know, my reflecting sister here, Yoi Nakamara. I can't say her name.
I'd like to thank the Gumaj clan, Gumaj people for this honour to be here on your country, and certainly I feel very privileged to be here at the Garma Forum. When the Yunupingu Foundation asks you to do something, you just say yes, even though you might feel not quite up to the task. So I said yes, and thank you. I'd like to particularly acknowledge the chairman of the Yunupingu Foundation, Mr. Yunupingu, for his lifelong contribution to Indigenous affairs on behalf of us all. My father and he were friends throughout their lives, and I bring the respect of my family to the Yunupingu family. I'm from the Aranda nation, Aranda on my mother's side, and Kalkadoon on my father's side. Are there any Aranda people in the audience? That's good, because my Aranda is very bad. So I can't get any reports. Don't tell anyone back home how bad I am. But I did want to say that a young Arandarilla and a young Mbantwa Mora Arinya, actually, you're probably the only one who understands that, being our government representative in Alice Springs. My Aranda name is Araka, which is my great-grandmother's name, and she was given that name because she was born on the major epicenter of the sun dreaming site, Ilbalinja, in northern Aranda country, and so I've carried on that name through her. My father was born at the bungalow, which is a native institution, or was a native institution, in Alice Springs, which is just next to Walachatara, which is a very significant site along the Two Sisters Songline, which travels from the south, is brought from the Pitjantjatjara ladies into Aranda country before it turns north and then heads west. I wanted to return to that story of the two sisters later, but I wanted to first acknowledge Djawa's words. I was in the audience last year when he spoke, and he said that, I reiterate his words, he said that I want to say to you that Yolngu people do not stand apart from you. We stand with you, and you stand with us. And the strength of Yolngu culture is also your strength. He said that the knowledge that Yolngu have can be shared and be used to again link up the songlines of our country. And with those words, sitting in the audience like you were, my back straightened as an Aboriginal person. And it took me back to a time in 1988, on the 26th of January at the bicentennial, where we were all gathered together in Sydney. And that day we hoped that the promise that had been made to us would be delivered. But as it was later described by Dr. Yunupingu, that promise disappeared like writing on the sand. But what did happen that day was that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people gathered in their thousands of their own will. They came across the country by any means necessary, and Tasmanian Aboriginal people stood alongside Torres Strait Islanders, stood along the Yolngu people, Aranda nations, people from Victoria, New South Wales. It was an extraordinary moment. And there was a whole lot of other Australians there to support us as well. And we walked through Gadigal country together in the site of first occupation. And we sang and danced and yelled out for land rights. And in that moment, it captured the essence of Indigenous people standing together. And it is that essence that I come to Garma seeking every year, and I find here in talking to other Indigenous people and our supporters, because this is where we find inspiration from the Yolngu people and others. I wanted to talk briefly about the songlines that have been the foundation of what we've spoken and heard about today, the land rights movement, which has been possibly our biggest unifying cause. The land rights movement has been built on the knowledge that we hold of the songlines, and for those of you who don't know, when you sing the song of your country, it's your title deeds to your land. And we can see how that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have worked locally but have linked across the country through the land rights movement, through the Songlines. We need to remember in recent times the Milpram versus Nabalco case here in 1972, fought in this country by these people, and the loss that they incurred, but that then inspired the Tent Embassy to be established on the lawns of Parliament House in Canberra in 1972 in response to that judgment. And from that sprung the national movement, in part, of self-determination and black power that spread across the country and inspired the medical service and legal services that we see today all across the country. Eddie Marbo from the Torres Strait looked back on the Milpram case and Ron Caston, his collaborator, and they looked at the Yolngu struggle for land, and on that case they built the Marbo case and took up the fight for native title and won recognition that we now benefit from across most parts of Australia. The Yorta Yorta in Victoria took up the fight and over a long period, years, struggled for recognition and then had to accept a very unjust decision to not return their lands to them. The WIC, of course, of Cape York built on that again. And what we've heard today about the Blue Mud Bay, the historic case that also recognised sea rights. Today we look back also on our people and the 1967 referendum and think about how we can build on those leaders and their vision to shape the movement towards constitutional recognition. So what defined these moments, I think, was the fact that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people worked locally but stood together at critical times. And this is what Garma offers. And I acknowledge the Yolngu people for their continuing invitation to invite us here and lead us in the 21st century. The Yolngu also continue to inspire us in their commitment to their cultural survival. And you'll all see on the Bungal ground the significant achievement they have made in maintaining their culture. You'll see 3 generations on the dance ground singing together and dancing. Their songlines are strong, as you've heard. And it makes me reflect on my own people and our situation. And the sort of cultural health of Aranda people. And I wanted to show you a map, which most of you will know because you've all been around Indigenous affairs for many years and you're a pretty sophisticated bunch. But hopefully you'll see on that screen a different way of looking at Australia. This is the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander world that is lying here, still here in this country that we still look to. Unfortunately, if you look at this map, about the bottom third of that map, the songlines are not so intact. And that is just a result of history, that Australia was colonised in the south. In my work, I've sifted through the records of many of those groups in the south, trying to find the fragments of the songlines to put into films and, in my work. And it's true to say that they are fragments and echoes. Aboriginal people are picking up those fragments and rebuilding them and working very hard to do that, and it's a testament to how precious their culture is that they are continuing and trying to continue that cultural regeneration. In Aranda country, we were lucky to have a massive desert between us and the south, and it meant that colonisation reached us about 100 years later than people in the south. And that meant that we were able to maintain our language and a lot of our classical culture and ceremonies. And although we pride ourselves on maintaining that culture, the truth is we are one generation away from losing the bulk of our songlines. The theme of this strand today is responsibility. And I'm speaking today as a very junior Aranda woman, but I'm part of a larger group of knowledgeable Aranda women. And I'm pleased to say that we are doing something about this situation. And we became acutely aware of the tipping point that we are at last year when we were gathered together and we were organising the opening ceremony for a festival at Mbantu in Alice Springs. And the women had to open it because it was at Walachatara, the site where my father was born, the place of the two sisters. And we needed to sing that two sisters song and perform that song. And the lady who held that had died a couple of months before. And we realised that there was no one who could sing that song. And we had our neighbours, the Pitjantjatjara ladies, they knew the song and they could teach us, but only in their language. So we had a cultural crisis. And of course, culture adapts and innovates, and we managed to, do the opening ceremony, and it was fine, but it galvanised us to think about, well, what are we going to do about this? Because this is a challenge that is on our doorstep. So we have been working strategically to look at the Aranda Nation of women, I'm talking on behalf of women, and do an inventory about who still carries the songlines. And we worked out of the thousands of Aranda women, there are only about 10 to 20 who hold this knowledge in their head on behalf of us all. And all of those ladies are old ladies, and they're precious knowledge holders to us. And so we've begun this inventory, and what we hope to do later this year is to sit down and record these songs. And we have to dress up, when we're looking for funding, we have to dress it up as a multi-platform online project or a documentary or something that really it's not. It's actually just we want to record these incredibly significant songs that link us in a very ancient way to our country. Our hope that in 200 years' time, a young Aranda woman who perhaps doesn't have her language and her grandmother to teach her will be able to pick up this recording and learn that song and be able to sing for her country and be able to have the heritage that is her birthright. And we hope that we might be able to develop a model that could be used by other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander nations, because the need for this is critical across the country. In the Kimberleys, it's a big problem. Many people I speak to have the same problem. They don't have the means or the resources to access these living memories of these songs right now. Our hope is to also record these songs for all Australians, so that they're there for the heritage of all of us, and so that the songlines can continue, as Djawa says, to connect us all. Thank you.